Welcome to this July First Thursday Club from the QSI. It's lovely to see you all again, many regulars here as well as one or two new people. This morning we have Steve Roberts with us, who is a senior QS at Gordian, and he is going to talk to us about, and I'm checking my notes for this one, maintenance procurement using measured term contracts and schedules of rates. So I'm just going to hand straight over to Steve and let him further introduce himself and get going with the course. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Morning, everyone. As Suzanne said, I'm Steve Roberts. I've been a QS for 30-something years now. 35 years of that has been involved with this kind of contract. I have worked as a consultant, as a client, as quite a long time for a contractor. And lately, for about the last 6 years, I've been working with NSR, the company that produces the National Schedule of Rates. Suzanne introduced me as being from Gordian. I'll explain why I'm not from NSR anymore as part of the presentation here. Okay, I am going to try and share my slideshow with you, which we tested earlier and it worked. So we'll see what happens. Why isn't that coming up? There we go. Right. Okay. There is.
There we go. Yep, we've got it.
It's working. Right. Let's start there. Okay. There is a section at the end for questions and answers, but if you need to interrupt me to ask a question as I'm talking about something, I'm actually okay with that. So don't worry about doing that. One thing though, with Teams, you can raise a hand and sort of indicate with a little hand wave thing that you've got a question. If you do that, I won't see it. So just unmute yourself and speak up instead. I'm absolutely fine with being interrupted. Okay, you ready to start? Let's get going. So we're going to talk today about how to deal with procuring maintenance works. We've got a few topics to cover. First of all, we're going to have a quick look at the history of NSR, the National Schedule of Rates, and then we're going to talk about the requirements that clients have when they are procuring maintenance works. There are several solutions for doing this, and I'll talk about their pros and cons, and then go on to the sort of meat of the subject, measured term contracts, which is one of the, or in fact, the best way to procure maintenance works, in my opinion. A bit of a talk about that, and then if we've got time, and I'll keep an eye on the clock for this, there may be time to demonstrate our software system, the NSR software system, which we call MTCs. But we'll sort of leave that optional because we might run out of time. And then, as I say, there's a Q&A session at the end there. Okay, so first of all, quick overview of NSR. NSR, the company, NSR Management Limited, first produced the Schedule of Rates in 1982 and has been producing them ever since. We have a suite of about 11 different schedules now, covering building works, mechanical works, electrical. We have a housing specific one, a highways maintenance, access notations. We produce quite a few bespoke schedules that are under a different brand for insurance companies and that sort of thing. And over the last couple of years, the newest one that we produce is the retrofit schedule, which is obviously to do with net zero stuff. All of our schedules are available in two versions, one that follows the rules of SMM7, one that follows the rules of NRM2. Obviously, they are different enough that you can't use both on the same contract, but you can use either. We sell them in a hard copy format, which is a physical book, which is quite a weighty thing, or an ebook. Well, we call it an ebook. It's actually a sort of a searchable online version of the schedule. And then we also produce MTCs, which is our QS software for measuring and valuing works. Also, we do consultancy and training works as well. In late last year, NSR Management was acquired by a company called Gordian, which is why Suzanne introduced me as being from Gordian. Gordian is an American company, part of the Fortive Group. Over in the States, Gordian runs what they call JOC, J-O-C, Job Order Contracting, which is the American version of measured term contracts, basically. So they wanted a presence in the UK to expand their market over here. And so they acquired us, and things are developing at quite a pace now with their input. Okay, next section is client requirements. So if you are a client or a client's agent, you will have certain requirements when you are looking to procure maintenance works. You know, you need to get somebody on site to carry out whatever repairs and maintenance are needed. How do you go about doing that? And specifically, what do you need them to do? Well, first of all, let's sort of look at a quick definition there. When I'm talking about maintenance, what I mean is reactive and minor works. There are three kinds of maintenance in this context. Reactive repairs are fixing something that's broken. Minor works are smaller projects, but they can still be quite high value. So reactive repairs, you know, the door's fallen off, the toilet's blocked, the windows are broken. Minor works can be, you know, office redecorations, new car parks, sort of revenue projects as opposed to capital projects, really. The value of them, minor is a bit of a misnomer. The value of them can vary depending on the client. I recently priced a job that was well over £1 million, but it was still a minor project for this client. And then you've got PPM, planned preventive maintenance, which is servicing and that kind of thing, which is normally to HVAC equipment. So when I'm talking about maintenance, what I'm talking about in this context is reactive repairs and minor works. PPM is a separate thing altogether. Right, client requirements. So what you need as a client or a client's agent is to guarantee certain things. You've got certain requirements. I mean, these are fairly obvious, but you need whoever turns up to do the work needs to provide a good quality service. That means good workmanship and good response times and that kind of thing as well, and feedback. The contractor needs to be competent. He needs to be able to deliver what you require. So he's got to have the resources to deal with emergency call-outs, that kind of things. Obviously, got to comply with the regs. Value for money from a QS point of view is a big thing. And of course, any pricing that the contractor does for you, any quotes or any invoices and so on, have to be transparent, scalable, and critically have to be auditable. So the main thing, really, certainly from a QS point of view, is that cost certainty is essential. You are looking at procuring maintenance works. You have to be sure that you're getting value for money, and you have to be sure that the price that you quoted is the price that you finish up paying. You know, you don't want any nasty surprises when the bill comes in. So there are a number of common ways of procuring maintenance works. Oh, that's not responding. Oh, it's gone too far now. Oh, no, hang on. Technology is failing me. Right, there we go. So you can have direct labour, you can have an ad hoc contractor, or a term contract. So each one of these has certain sort of pros and cons to it. With direct labour, where you've got your own operatives who are working for you, they are salaried, and you know, they're literally sat around waiting for you to tell them what to do. Because they're directly employed, your control over the workmanship is very, very high. An ad hoc contractor, one who you haven't got a contractual relationship with, it's just somebody that you ring up and get them to come and do the repairs. You've very little control over workmanship. Whereas with a term contract, you know, you've got a contractor tied into conditions of contract that specify the standards that are required. Control over workmanship is excellent. Same goes with service. Direct labour obviously got great control. Ad hoc, not so much. And term contractors, again, you've got good control over service. Some of the issues come in when you've got things like emergencies now. So if you've got a sort of smallish pool of direct labour, if one or more emergencies crops up, they may not have the resources to deal with it. Whereas the two contractors, the ad hoc and the term contractor, probably will, because they can call on subcontractors and things like that. Same goes with projects or minor works. Your direct labour team may not have the resources. Again, the contractors probably will. That's an issue, because if you finish up wanting to do a project and you haven't got the direct labour to do it, then you're back at square one. You need to do some sort of procurement process to get somebody to do those projects. With direct labour, you do have non-productive costs. If the engineers are sat around with nothing to do, you still have to pay them their salaries. And so, you know, it's important. They need managing, they need their work scheduling, so that they're not sat around costing money. Whereas with the contractors, if they're not working for you, they're not charging you. So Direct labour, when it comes to cost control, direct labour gives you really good cost control. Ad hoc contractor gives you very, very questionable cost control. And a term contract could give you good cost control. It depends on how you set it up. So of all the options there, setting aside the issue of cost control, term contracts are the best option because it gives you the more positives. So there we are. Just to prove a point, there's a term contract. So how do you deal with cost control? Well, you can get a quote per job, but that's just not practical. You can do time and materials, which is okay-ish, but you can't forecast cost, you can't control cost. It's very difficult to value variations, and there's no incentive for the contractor to work efficiently. You know, they're getting paid regardless of how long it takes them to do the job. Or the other thing, which you can't really see, it's crossed out there, but a comprehensive contract. This is where you pay the contractor a regular fixed amount, usually monthly, and they do whatever repairs are needed, which is easy, but there are some quite significant drawbacks with this. So, you know, what happens if you're doing a minor project? Is that included as part of the regular payment or not? If it's not, you're back to square one again with your procurement issues. And how do you deal with things that are out of contract? You know, if we're talking about doing reactive repairs and a door falls off its hinges or the roof starts leaking or whatever, yeah, that's probably within contract and is part of the payment. But what happens if somebody pulls the door off, or you know, somebody throws a brick through a window, or is it an upgrade? You know, is the plant that requires repair obsolete now? You know, are you changing light fittings from fluorescent ones to LEDs? Is that an upgrade? Is that a repair? There's all these questions. All these questions put risk onto the contractor, and contractors will deal with risk and mitigate risk by putting their price up. So, although a comprehensive contract is, on the face of it, very easy to manage and gives you good cost control, the truth is it doesn't at all. It doesn't give you very good value for money. It's difficult to manage, and it leaves you open to quite a lot of issues. So the best option really is to use a schedule of rates. So the benefits of a schedule of rates are that it will allow tender analysis right at the very beginning to be nice and easy. It gives excellent cost control. It allows you to forecast accurately and predict costs well in advance. Any claims from the contractor are easy to audit. Any variations can be priced really quickly. And in fact, quotes can be prepared very quickly, well before the work is carried out. And also, you know, if you've got a framework where you've got a few contractors, their quotes can be compared to each other quite easily as well. But what is a schedule of rates? Well, a schedule of rates is best viewed really as a hypothetical bill of quantities, and I'll sort of explain what I mean by that later on. But it contains a large number of items. Our building schedule's got 12,000 items in it. Our M&E schedules have got a further 12,000. So between the three of them, there's 24,000 items in there. We try and cover all sort of possibilities with typical building types. There are exceptions. You know, if we're talking about grade 1 listed buildings, there's not very much in there in the schedules to deal with those. All the items are priced according to the SMM7 or NRM rules and are broken down per number, tons, meters cubed, and so on. When you are valuing a job, you break the job down into its component parts and apply whatever rate is appropriate for that. And then any works that are carried out on a term contract are measured against a schedule of rates, which is why it's a measured term contract. Okay, gone too far. So part of my job is to do training to organisations and things like this. And I will always ask the question at the beginning, you know, when I'm doing it face to face, there's always people there who say, "Oh, I've never seen a schedule of rates, never used one, no idea how it works. It's all completely new to us." But the truth is, it's not. A schedule of rates is a really, really simple document, and it's something that everybody uses every day. And that slide that you just got a sneak preview of there is an example of a schedule of rates. It is a list of items with item codes, descriptions, and prices. And if you look at it on that basis, if you're looking to work out what your meal is going to cost, you can pick the items from the list, add up the prices, there's your exact price of what your meal is going to cost. When it comes to pay for it, you know what it's going to be. If you vary your meal, if you decide that you want egg fried rice instead of noodles or whatever, you can deduct one, add in the other, recalculate the price of your meal. It's that simple. Just substitute sweet and sour chicken for brickwork or paintwork or whatever, and there's your schedule of rates. It's nothing more complicated than that. The difficulty with schedule of rates comes in updating them and dealing with thousands and thousands of items. Okay, before we move on, anybody got any questions? I did see a hand flick up actually, but I couldn't catch who it was. No? Okay, we'll carry on. So, having decided that you want to use a schedule of rates and a measured term contract, how do you go about tendering? And how does the tendering process work? Well, with traditional projects, on a straightforward typical capital project, so you're building a new factory or a new hospital or a school or a housing estate or whatever, the process, although there's a lot of steps to it, is actually quite a simple process. You decide what you want, you design it, use that design to produce a bill of quantities. That bill of quantities is as you know, a detailed list of exactly what you want the contractor to do. You can then get the contractor to price that and then choose your preferred contractor. So, it's a long process, but it's not complicated. It's just got those steps to it. The problem is, when it comes to maintenance works, you can't tell the contractor what you want them to do. You've no idea. You can roughly say we want you to do some roofing works, but we've no idea what or how much or when it needs doing. We call this IDIQ, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. We don't know what we want you to do. We don't know when you want you to do it, and we don't know how much we want you to do. So give us a price for that. It's impossible. You can't price that as a contractor. So what you do instead is use a schedule of rates, because a schedule of rates is a list of things that you might be asked to do. This is what I was meaning before about a hypothetical bill of quants. So bill of quants is what you are going to do. A schedule of rates is what you might do. So as I mentioned, we've got 12,000 items in the building schedule. Any contract will not use all 12,000 items. Maybe use a third of them, but every single contract will use a different third depending on what their building stock is and what the requirements are. But they're all sort of in there just in case you need them. We price the schedule in advance, so our schedule is priced. Every single one of those 12,000 items has got a price next to it. That price is what we think the average cost to the average contractor, and that's important, not the client, the contractor, the cost to the contractor to carry out those works on the average site in the average part of the country. Items, as I said before, priced per number, ton, meter cube, whatever, and the prices are based on the duration of the task when you strip all the variables away from it. So the prices include all necessary labour, plant and materials to carry out that task. As part of the tender process, contractors will look at our prices and apply a percentage adjustment to them. That percentage covers things like overheads and profit, prelims, travel time, that kind of thing. So they will take our base rates, apply a percentage adjustment, and then that becomes the price that the client gets charged for the works. Okay, terminology, we can skip past that. I should have deleted that one. So, which schedule of rates do you want to use? There are four main ones in use on measured term contracts. The PSA schedule, which was produced by Carillion, obviously that is no longer produced or updated. There are still contracts in existence that use the PSA still, but they're all pretty much coming to an end now. I think the PSA was last updated in 2018, so the very latest version is 6 years old now. It's well out of date, and it's pretty much dying. The NHF schedule, National Housing Federation, or NatFed as it's sometimes called, is produced by an organisation called M3, and that is housing specific, so it's only for social housing. BCIS produce schedule of rates, but it's not really widely used in MTCs. It is used, but not widely used. And then you've got us, the National Schedule of Rates, NSR. We, as I said before, have a wide choice of schedules for all property types, including housing specific and the retrofit one. The schedules are updated every year as well. So the NSR is available in two different versions: SMM7, which uses the Common Arrangement of Work sections indexing system, and the NRM2 version, which uses the same indexing system, which is pretty much NRM2's own system to index that there. All the items in the schedule have a separate price for labour, plant, and materials. The reason for that is it's sort of twofold. One, it allows for flexibility. So, you know, if you're looking at a rate that says supply and fix MK light switch, for argument's sake, what you're actually doing is supplying and fixing some other brand of light switch, which is 4 times the price. The labour part's going to be the same, but you can change the material price, so you can be flexible and make sure that all the rates match exactly what is required on site. But it also allows for transparency as well. You know, it's very clear what the labour, what the materials, and what the plant element of this particular rate are, so you can analyse what you're doing. We update the schedules annually. New schedules come out at the beginning of August. There are 2 ways of dealing with using a schedule within a contract. We recommend that the contract uses the latest schedule every year, but some contracts will use one schedule and apply an inflation percentage to that every year instead. We strongly recommend against doing that, and I can give you an actual practical example. Back when I was a freelance QS, I was working for a contractor who was working for a very large organisation who was spending, you know, £750,000 a month on maintenance works. They were using the 2009 schedule on a contract where the final account was actually in 2017. So they were using 2009 schedule with an inflation percentage applied every year, which seems like a simple and reasonable way to do it. However, in 2009, LED light fittings were £250 each. In 2016, they were £30 each. And the client was paying £250 plus 6 years of inflation for these light fittings, and the contractor that I was working for was buying them for 30 quid. So it's important to use the current schedule, because you can get your fingers burnt otherwise. Not all prices are reviewed, but they don't all go up. Some go down as technology advances and, you know, and things become more widely accepted. The rates and schedules have certain exclusions, which I'll show you a list of later on, but the key ones are they don't include prelims, they don't include contractors' overheads and profit, and they don't include travel time. So the contractor will need to allow for those and other things as well when they're calculating their percentage. The key is that all of our rates are at a point that we think is the cost, and that cost is offset from where the contractor needs it to be, and that offset is made up for by that percentage adjustment, but they're all offset by the same amount. So certainly trade section by trade section, and probably the entire schedule actually, you only need to calculate one percentage adjustment, because, you know, if one rate needs 10% added to it, they all need 10% added to it. They're sort of pitched constantly at the same offset from where the contractor wants it to be. Okay, how we put the schedules together. As I mentioned before, each rate has 3 key elements: labour, plant, and materials, which are always added together to come to the total rate. If we look at how we calculate the labour rates first, what we do is every year we go to the various sort of trade unions, governing bodies, CILB, JIB, and so on, and gather hourly rates, or rather average hourly rates of pay for the various trades. So we will look at, I don't know, a joiner, for example, and determine that they earn, I'm not sure what the figure was this year, let's call it £16. The joiner earns £16 an hour. We will take that £16 an hour and apply various calculations to it for things like bonus schemes and national insurance and hand tools and levies and so on, and arrive at a cost to the contractor to employ the joiner of £24 an hour, say. Every single task has a minute value. So this is a sample of from our minute value schedule rates. So you can see there, the third one from the bottom, 5170827, take off doors, ease and rehang. That's priced per door, and we've got 30 minutes for a carpenter, 30 minutes for a carpenter's labourer. We know that a carpenter costs £24 an hour, therefore the price for the carpenter part is £12, and then the same calculation for whatever is the carpenter's labour price. Add those together, that's the labour price for that task. So it's quite a simple process. We just sort of take the minute value and multiply it by the hourly rates. So that's the labour part done. As I said before, it's important to remember that this is cost. This is not including profit and overheads and all the rest of it. Plant is fairly simple. Plant is only priced when it's essential for the task. So for brickwork, there's a mixer. For air conditioning, there's the evacuation plant, that kind of thing. If the plant is not always required, then there isn't a plant price in it. We go to all the usual suspects, HSS, A plant, speedy hire, and so on. Price the plant as required. We know how long the task takes. We can find out how much the plant costs to hire per hour, and then calculate it back quite simply. We also allow for things like consumables, fuel, blades, that kind of thing as well. Materials is slightly more complicated because there's so many of them. We have well over 12,000 items that we research individually every year. It is a colossal task and it takes us months to do it. But in the same way that we gather the plant prices, we go to the main suppliers, whether it's sort of Six Electrical or Screwfix or, the usual suspects, Travis Perkins, people like that. We will find out what the trade prices are. We don't generally apply trade discounts unless it's the kind of thing that everybody gets discount on. So cabling typically gets large percentage discounts, so we will allow for that in our pricing. We regularly go through the schedules and update the materials items. Maybe a particular item is no longer available and it's been replaced by a different one, so we'll update the items accordingly. And all of our materials prices include an element of wastage and fixings and consumables and things like that. So, for example, if we're looking at tiling a wall, for example, you tile an area of wall is 1 meter by 1 meter, so it's 1 square meter. You actually need to use about 1.05 square meters of tiles because of wastage for cuts and so on. But you also need adhesive and grout and spacers. And so, if you look at the materials price for tiling in our schedule, you'll see that it includes that wastage and the adhesive and grout and fixings and so on. It's important to know that because if you are substituting the materials price, like I said before about light switch, you also need to know what else is included in that materials price. At the back of our schedules, we actually publish the basic prices, labour, plant and materials. Just for reference purposes, it helps contractors to tender. The schedule layout looks like that. So this is a sample page from our building schedule. Ignore the prices because it's actually quite an old version this, so the prices themselves are out of date now. But you can see there, Section C, demolitions and alterations, which is the standard cause system. And then in accordance with the SMM7 rules, in this case, we've got it split up into areas. So we've got repair roofing per square meter, and then different rates depending on the actual size of the area repaired. You can see in the materials price column, it's the same price per square meter because it's the same materials, the same area. Labour price has changed because obviously it's more expensive to do small areas than it is to do bigger areas. So you can see there, if you're carrying out small repairs, they work out at £32.64 square meter. If you're doing an entire roof, it's £20.41. Those prices there are to be adjusted by the contractor. Okay, so that's quite sort of straightforward. So a quick recap of how to tender. The base rates in the schedule are what we think the average cost for the average contractor is. The contractor will apply a percentage adjustment to them to cover overheads and profit and other variables. And then if you do it right, and quite a lot of clients don't, you'd be surprised how many clients make this far more complicated than it needs to be. Tender analysis is very simple. You've got 3 contractors. Contractor A wants 10%, contractor B wants 6%, contractor C wants 12%. You can see who's the cheapest because everything else is the same. The adjustments that the contractor calculates need to include for things like overheads and profit, compliance with prelims, travel time, disposal of waste. I'll not sort of dwell on this because I'm going to send out a copy of these slides and you can look at these at your leisure later on. but it's just a list of things. And we publish this list in the schedules, so the contractor is aware of what they need to allow for when they're calculating their percentages. Now, with any contract that uses a schedule of rates, regardless which schedule you use, you do need to allow for other things as well. So the schedule is not an exhaustive list. It can't possibly cover everything. There's always going to be certain instances where the only way to charge for work is on a day work basis. There's also going to be things like call-out charges, non-productive overtime, where the work is carried out outside normal hours. Maybe plant or materials are supplied on a day work basis. Maybe the specialist subcontractors required. And then if your contract spreads over a large range, a large value range, you can use the same schedule, but when you get to the bigger value jobs, it's appropriate to apply a discount to it. So value band discounts are exactly that. So you can use the same schedule for jobs up to £500, and then the same schedule for jobs up to £750,000, but you wouldn't apply the same percentage. You'd need to work out some way of applying a discount just to take advantage of economies of scale. And then decide, as I said before, you use the current schedule, which is updated every year, or do you use one schedule and apply inflation to it, which we strongly recommend against. So you've done your tender, you've selected your contractor, you're now at the post-contract stage. This is the bit where the schedule really sort of comes into its own. So the basics are, whenever works are carried out, whatever the works are, you produce a document that we call a measure, which is basically a list of what was done, what the items are in the schedule that apply to those works, and therefore what the rates are, and then the adjustments and so on. Because the schedule is as inclusive as it can be, but it's not going to include everything, there is a mechanism for dealing with works that are not covered by the schedule. So the hierarchy is that if the work that is carried out matches exactly what the schedule says, you use the schedule rate. If it's similar, you can take one of the rates out of the schedule and prorata it to make it match. Or if it's completely dissimilar, but it's still measurable, and by that I mean you can calculate the square meterage or linear meterage or whatever, you can actually create what's known as a custom code. Custom codes are also called star rates or rogue spot items, depending on who taught you. But basically, it's a new code that is now part of an appendix for your contract. To illustrate what I mean by that, one of our biggest customers, Network Rail, actually use an entire schedule of custom codes for works that you only find on railway platforms. The station edgings have got a price per meter, that kind of thing. They will never be in the main schedule because nobody else needs them. So they've got their own sort of custom code star rate schedule that covers those things. So they've now got the benefit of having a rate for these items if they ever come up. Okay, measuring can be split in sort of two ways, really. You can either look at the work before it's carried out on site or after it's carried out on site. Before is obviously called a pre-measure, after is a post-measure. So a pre-measure would be based on drawings or a site visit, and is typically used for quotes or budget estimates. The key here is that when you are pre-measuring a job, there is likely to be something that you can't predict. You don't know what's going to happen when you set the ceiling down or take the flooring up, that kind of thing. So there might need to be an element of contingency allowed in there, which is not a problem. As long as it's identified, you can put in a figure in there. It's just a provisional sum, basically. Post-measure is carried out after the work is done on site, based on drawings or notes or a site visit, or based on the pre-measure. The key to the thing to remember there is that if the pre-measure had an element of contingencies in it, you've got to allow for that in the post-measure. You might need to remove it or replace it with an actual measure for that work or whatever is appropriate. Post-measures are used for valuations and for invoicing, and therefore they need to be detailed and accurate. As the client or as the client's QS, you will be expected, or you should be carrying out audits on these things. If the contractor says they've done 50 square meters or something, you need to be able to prove that that's right. Okay. Next step, and this is the thing, whenever I'm delivering this training to clients or contractors, you cannot stress this part enough. The information that you've got about the job is absolutely critical. You cannot accurately value, you cannot accurately audit, you cannot accurately quote or predict the costs or anything if the information is not detailed, is not accurate. And I've got an actual example of that shortly. So any information that you've got has to be accurate, has to be as descriptive and detailed as possible, sometimes backed up with photographs and drawings and whatever is necessary. Better information means more accurate measures and easier audits. From a contractor point of view, that means you get paid quicker. From a client point of view, that means you're not overpaying. So from both sides, it's crucial. Depending on how the contract is set up, you can use multiple schedules. So as I said before, we have a building, mechanical and electrical schedule. They are actually 3 separate publications, but they can be viewed as 3 volumes of the same schedule. There is overlap between them. As long as you're using the same schedule year, any rate that appears in, for example, the building schedule that is also in the electrical schedule, it's the same rate, same description, same price, therefore needs the same percentage adjustment added to it by any given contractor. So any job can span one or more of the schedules, and as long as they're from the same year, that's not a problem. Measures should follow that hierarchy that I said before. Use the NSR rates or use the schedule rates if it matches exactly. If not, prorata it. If you can't do that, come up with a custom code. And last resort is day works. There'll always be some day works within any contract, but it's a last resort because it gives very little control and forecastability. Okay, moving on to measuring. Where's my thing? There it is. Measuring. So the process of measuring a job is actually pretty straightforward, and it's the same regardless of what job you're looking at, whether it's a dead simple job or a £1 million project. The process is the same. You get information and you convert it into a measure. So if we look at this very, very simple job here, the door's not closing properly. You can substitute that for an extension building or re-roof the factory or whatever. That's the scope of works. Door's not closing properly. The implication is repair it. So in this case, the engineer goes out to site and reports back that he attended site, found the door was binding on the frame, hinges are worn and the frame's loose. He's took the door off, removed the hinges, put new ones on, resecured the loose frame and shaved the edge of the door, tied it up, left it all working on completion. That's absolutely typical of the kind of information that you get back from engineers who carry out reactive works. But with more detail and more lines, that could easily apply to a much bigger job. It's just a description of what was done. If you take that and break that down, you finish up with stages of the job. And this is just a simple takeoff list. Attended site, located the door, found out what's wrong with it, took it off, and so on. The next step is to identify which one of those things is chargeable, or in fact, put a response next to each one of these things to say whether or not it's chargeable. If it is, what do we charge for it? That will look like that. So attending site, including the percentage adjustment, so there's no separate line charge for that. Locate the door, including adjustments. Took off the door, well, there's a rate there, C5170-831, which is actually for takeoff, reduced width, so that's shaving the edge and rehanging the door. A couple of rates there for takeoff hinges and supply and fit new ones. Rate code there for resecure the frame. Shave the edge of the door, well, that's included in C5170, so we don't need a separate rate for that. Tidied up and left and completion are included as well. So we've now got the sort of takeoff list really for this job. We've identified the codes next to it. We know what the quants are. In this case, it's 1 for everything. So we can then convert that into a measure, and that's the measure for this job. There's the item code. If I do that there, there's the item code, there's the description, quantity 1, price, out of the schedule. Same for all these items. Remove hinges and supply and fit hinges are priced in pairs, so it's 1 pair. Add that all together, you get £65.91. In this imaginary job, the contractor's applied an adjustment of 15%, so their charge for this job is £75.80. And it's simple as that. With more lines, you can cover any kind of work with this. Like I said, I priced a job quite recently, it was well over £1 million. It had hundreds and hundreds of lines in it, but it was the same process. Identify what's required, produce a takeoff list, find the items in the schedule that apply to that takeoff list, and add them all up. You know, it really is not rocket science. But going back to the description of this job, which is going to be that slide there, contract said attend site and found door binding on frame. Remember what I said a couple of slides earlier about information being crucial? What if we found a fire door? So that measure should now include things like door closers, intumescent strips, smoke seals. You know, that one word there has got quite a significant financial implication on this job because it expands the work quite significantly. So this is me stressing the point again. The information is absolutely crucial.
Sorry. Earlier on, you said that it didn't include travel time in any of the rates.
Yes.
So when attending site, surely you've got to factor in travel time because the site, you know, you may have a nationwide contract to do it, but you're working God knows where.
No, that's exactly right. At tender stage, the contractor will be given an indication or a property list or something that says you will be working in the Midlands area or nationally or whatever it is. They can use that information to calculate their percentage adjustments. We can't allow for that in the rates because we have no idea where the contract is. You know, the rates in the schedule are for carrying out the task. So that hanging a door task, for example, where it was 30 minutes, that is stood in the doorway, door in hand, hang the door. When you strip away all the variables, it doesn't include for getting to the site, signing in on site, you know, finding the door in the building, which might be on the 30th floor. None of that can be priced within that 30 minutes of hanging a door because it would always be wrong. So we can't include it in the rates. The contractor includes it in their adjustment, and what the contractor charges the client is the rates plus their adjustment. So it is built into the final price, but it's not built into the schedule of rates prices. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you could end up with multiple different percentages because you've got, you know, you're based in Birmingham, but you've got percentages for working in different cities because of the travel time.
Yeah.
But then again, your rate says one door. So you price that one door, and looking at your rates for roofing, you're like talking £4 difference for doing a 0.2 square meter as opposed to a 10 square meter. But both are going to take you all day anyway. Yeah, because by the time you've got there, you're not going to be able to get to another job. So it's almost like, how do you build that on without going to day work?
Right, no, that's a good question. You can allow for that. But first of all, if it's a national contract, it's very unusual to have one contract for the whole country. You would split it down into regions. You know, and you may have the same contractor, but they will have different contracts for each region or lot. So that sort of eliminates the travel time issue. So if the contractor is a national contractor and they've got offices all over the place, they will send out guys from their local office to that site that's nearest to them. So they can sort of manage their costs that way. But it has to be an average. It's the term that comes up time and time again in this kind of contract is swings and roundabouts. The contractor cannot charge more for the difficult jobs because they don't charge less for the easy jobs. And that difficult and easy applies to close and distant as well. You know, it's the same price regardless. And from a contractor's commercial manager point of view, you have to look at the contract as a whole, whether it's profitable or not. You can't look at individual jobs because some jobs will not be profitable, some will be very profitable, and overall they will average out to hopefully get you the returns that you need. But the point, in terms of sort of programming the works and so on, there's always going to be emergencies where you have to drop everything and go and just do the small repair on the roof, and that's, you know, messes up your day. There's usually a call-out charge for that. If it's a non-emergency job, typically the contractor is going to be in the area or even on site doing similar work on a different building, so they'll do it all together in one go and sort of maximise their efficiency that way. But that sort of thing can't be included in the rates themselves because it would always be wrong. That you would always be overcharging or undercharging if you allowed for the extremes of the sort of scenarios, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that answer that? Yeah. All right. What are we doing for time wise? I'm not sure we're going to have time to give you a demo of the ebooks and MTCQS system. If you are interested in seeing what that looks like, please give me a ring or send me an email or something, and we can set that up separately. But I'm sort of conscious of time now. It's 10 to 9, so that brings us. It's not working to our Q&A slide, which isn't coming up. Hang on, I'll do it manually. Boom, there we go. Q&As. Okay, anybody got any other questions? Anything you need to look at or is keeping you up at night? Go.
Hi. Sorry,
Hi, Paul.
Steve. It's been really interesting. I sort of haven't worked on the MTC for a while, but I many years ago worked on MOD projects using the PSA schedule. So
Yeah.
When everything was manual, so that was yeah, interesting. But my question was really about the when the contractors apply the percentages, when they're tendering, do they apply them globally, individually, or by trade?
It depends on how the client has set up the tender. We recommend, and we try and guide clients, but sometimes they don't listen. We try and guide them to do it trade section by trade section.
Yeah.
You can just as equally apply one adjustment to the entire schedule,
Yeah.
which is okay, but it's a bit of a broad brush approach, really. If you do it section by section, that will allow contractors to play to their strengths. Maybe the contractor doesn't have any painters in house, so they have to subcontract the painting work out.
Yeah.
Their costs are going to be slightly higher.
Yeah.
We do get contracts where tenders, so where clients want it breaking down even further than that, and it just becomes an admin nightmare. But the idea is that, I mean, I've been doing this for years, and I've been doing training for years, and I still can't find the right word to describe it. All of our rates are, and this is not the correct word, all of our rates are wrong. They are not what the contractor wants to charge the client, but they're all wrong by the same amount.
Yes.
The contractor corrects that wrongness by applying a percentage, and it's the same percentage.
So if you take them as a whole, they're right.
Yeah, if you take our rates plus the contractor's percentage, it's right for that contractor. Yeah. In fact, one of the things that we get quite often from contractors who don't understand it, and it's quite a regular complaint, really, is they'll come back to us and say, we can't do it for those rates. And the response is, you're not supposed to. What you're supposed to do is adjust those rates to make that rate what you want it to be. If you still can't do it for that rate, it's your adjustment that's wrong. And it's that, it's the adjustment that makes it right.
Yeah. Do you sorry if I'm hogging this. Do you find that there's also an issue where contractors want to know like the scope of work? If there's, say, renew 50 doors or say 500 doors, and suddenly they've only got one in the schedule, then they start crying foul. Or even if it's the other way, because they base their rates on one, expecting them to be 500 or whatever.
Yeah, the rate in the schedule, if we stick with doors and ignore everything else, the rate in the schedule is per door. So as a client, you would say to the contractor, how much would you charge me for replacing a door? We want you to do 500 of them, or we want you to do 10 of them, and the price per door will vary depending on the size of the contract. So that information needs to come from the client in the first instance to give an idea of the sort of spend and scope of works and that kind of stuff. And then the contractor can pitch their percentage accordingly.
Yeah. So again, it's that getting that information from the client really to make it as accurate as possible.
It is, but the trouble is that you're asking the client to predict something that is unpredictable.
Yeah.
So if you're lucky, you might have historical data. Otherwise, it's just an absolute stab in the dark. And that's okay, but it's not as accurate.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions for Steve whilst we've got him here?
Sorry, me again.
No.
Just one. On the database, etc.
Yeah.
It's obviously average. So it's inaccurately accurate or accurately inaccurate, whichever one you want to say.
Yeah.
But can the contractor, rather than just add on a percentage, can they actually physically, put in the rates for their trade per hour, and then it automatically can recalculate if they obviously signed up to the most expensive version, I assume?
Yes, they can do. Then it becomes sort of a bespoke schedule, really. But if they do that, it becomes very difficult for tender analysis. So it's better and much easier just to stick with the schedule itself and adjust it accordingly with the percentage adjustments.
Why would it become difficult for tender analysis?
Because you're not comparing
raw rates, but
it's.
I guess you're now looking at the rate, not the contract, not the overhead.
Yeah. Okay. It's not. It doesn't make tender analysis difficult. It makes it more difficult than it needs to be. It's more complex than it needs to be. But some contractors do that. We've got one client in particular who wants a different percentage adjustment for materials, labour, and plant, which is different again depending on the value and the location, and it just becomes a horrendous nightmare. It will be much easier for everybody to just just apply the percentage as the schedule is designed to be. It's flexible enough that you can do that, but there's no real benefit to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Got a little bit more time if anyone has one more question before we have to close out. No, everybody happy? Okay, lovely.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. Very interesting.
Yeah,
Thanks.
good
Talk
talk,
there.
Steve.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
It's a pleasure. Thank you everyone for attending this morning. As always, if you want a CPD certificate or a copy of Steve's overhead slides there, either pop a message in the chat now or email me at any time and we can sort that out for you. Steve didn't have a slide there with his contact details on. So
I'll put that in the chat now.
can,
then there we go.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Or if you miss it from the chat, then you can always get his details from me again on the email or whatever. Our next First Thursday club will be the 1st of August, I believe, when Nigel Barr will be here to talk to us about JCT 24, give us a little overview of what's happening there. So that should be quite interesting. As always, details will come out next week on the email, or just email me again and I can send you the details. Oh, there we go. There's Steve's details in the chat if anybody needs those. So yeah, thank you all for attending, and particularly a huge thank you to Steve for a really interesting presentation there.
Yeah, well done.
See you all soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
you.
Suzanne.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Suzanne, I'll send you